Hello, my name is Madison Salvatore and I am a student in the University of Connecticut. Currently, I am enrolled in the history of computer graphics, and this is a brief history of video games and graphics. The beginning of video games occurred in the 1950s. In 1958, Willie Higginbotham created Tennis for Two on a large analog computer which connected to an oscilloscope screen for public demonstration. It simulated trajectories with wind resistance and it is played with two custom aluminum controllers. It is often considered the first video game. It was also the first computer game to be created purely as an entertainment product rather than for academic research or commercial technology promotion. The 1960s. In 1962, MIT's Steve Russell created Space War. It was a computer-based space combat video game for the Program Data Processor 1. It was the first video game played on multiple computer installations. 1967 to 1968 was the creation of the Brown Box by Ralph Boyer and his co-workers. They designed the first video game console that worked on a standard television with the addition of a light gun. The Brown Box developed a total of 12 games. Now we move into the 1970s and the 1980s. So, 1972 heralded the release of the Odyssey, the first commercial video game console. It was marketed on Magnavox TV. The system used 6 cartridges to play up to 12 games featuring dots and lines on the screen. 1977 was the Atari 2600's release date. Joysticks and interchangeable game cartridges played multicolored on the screen. The graphics weren't as impressive as arcade games, which is perfect because it brings us to the time of arcade games. So, in 1978, Space Invaders was released. In 1979, Activision. 1980, Pac-Man, one of the most popular I'd say, was released. In 1981, Donkey Kong was released, which showed the beginnings of the Mario character, and Microsoft's Flight Simulator was released, which was pretty much just a dot and line vector situation. The early arcade games had pretty simplistic graphics due to the lack of processing power of computers at the time. They utilized 3D vector graphics like in the Star Wars arcade game of 1983 or that Flight Simulator we talked about earlier. In 1983, the NES was released. The graphics took a leap forward with the use of sprites like in Mario. Mario was actually created by seamlessly stitching together 4 individual sprites. The NES was the best-selling console in video game history to date. In 1989, the Game Boy was released. It was the first major handheld game console with an 8-bit CPU and a black and white LCD screen. In that same year, the Sega Genesis was released, which had 16-bit technology. Now we move into the console era, which was the 1990s. In 1990, the Super Nintendo was released. The color palettes were expanded, and sprites were able to show more detail than before. Nintendo utilized Mode 7 for racing games and created the impression of 3D imagery by manipulating 2D objects. They also figured out that by adding an extra chip to the game cartridge, it could allow greater graphics processing power. In 1994, the Sony PlayStation was released. It had a 32-bit system and used CD as its medium for the games, meaning developers were able to store more data on the game disc. It had full, rudimentary 3D graphics. In 1996, the Nintendo 64 was released. Super Mario 64 helped write the book on how to make 3D platformers and ushered in an era of 3D platforming copycats. Most of the 3D on the Nintendo 64 was just clever sprite placement and manipulation, and the cartridges were faster than CD-ROMs, which eliminated the need for memory cards. In 1999, the Sega Dreamcast was released. Sonic Adventure entered a 3D realm. It was the first full 3D game that had no clever sprite placement like the Mario game. Now we enter the millennium, which was the 2000s. The big three companies at that time were Sony, Nintendo, and Microsoft. In 2000, PlayStation 2 was released. It had a 128-bit system with backwards compatibility, and it also functioned as a DVD player. In 2001, the Xbox was released. It had a 128-bit system with PC technology. It also heralded the release of the beloved Halo series. In 2002, the Game Boy Advance was released. It was a backwards compatible portable system with an LCD screen that could display more than 32,000 colors. It also had a rechargeable lithium-ion battery and a folding case. In 2005, the PSP was released, and it featured wireless compatibility, high-quality graphics, and non-gaming functions, which was big for a portable device. Also in 2005, the Xbox 360 was released. It featured a sleeker and customizable industrial design with wireless controllers and an enhanced online experience. It ran on a 3-core power PC-based CPU to better render game physics and graphics. Now this takes us to the modern day. Games are now in HD and run at higher frame rates. Graphics get more realistic and they straddle the line of the uncanny valley. The cost of game development has gone up significantly, often offset with downloadable content, microtransactions, and other in-game pay options. Thanks for watching, and I hope you learned something today.